conservative voice in America fighting the enemies of freedom, Mark Walters.
And welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Armed American Radio's Daily Defense here in the SIG SAUER studios begins right now. Mark Walters filling your prescription for freedom today in front of the Patriot Mobile Communication and Command Center microphone. It's all being brought to you by the great X Insurance. Greg, if you want to welcome in, by the way, Greg, welcome back. Missed you yesterday, brother.
Yeah, it was a nice day off.
Get some fun stuff done?
Nothing fun, just a bunch of priorities I had to wrap up.
All right, well, you got it taken care of, and, well, that old adage, I'll see you soon. I'll see you too soon.
Yep.
It's true today. It never changes. Greg, we are all over social media again today, but we are audio only today, ladies and gentlemen, on social media, so you get to listen to us like old school radio because we're making some camera changes. Greg, if you would be kind enough to tell people where to tune in and listen on all those social media platforms today, we'll get started with our guest, Ryan Petty. A lot to talk about today.
Sure, if you want to do a search for Armed American Radio with Mark Walters over on YouTube and Rumble, and you can go over to X at AAR Mark. If you'd like to join our live chat, just head on over to your app store, grab the Telegram messaging app, create your profile, and search for Armed American Radio Conversations.
That will do it. And don't forget Facebook.com. I'm the Facebook guy now, Facebook.com. You can also watch us and hear us today, see the spinning Armed American Radio logo, and listen to the broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court ruling came down in the Vanderstock case today, otherwise known as the ghost gun frame receiver rule, and the Supreme Court overturned the Fifth Circuit, upholding the Biden-era restrictions. We're going to talk about that in great detail today because there's a lot going on with this ruling. You can view it two ways. We're going to cover it from both sides, and we're going to do it with Ryan Petty right now. Ryan, welcome in, brother.
Mark, great to be with you.
Thanks for jumping in here with me today, Ryan. I appreciate it very much. You read the ruling. What was your first thought when you got through the ruling? And I can't wait to cover the two of the three concurring opinions. And, of course, Thomas eviscerates the majority in his dissent. We'll get to all of that. But the overall ruling written by Gorsuch, when you finished it, what went through your head?
Well, a couple of things. First thing I did, I always jump down and read Thomas first, right? So he's one of my favorites, and I wanted to read the dissenting opinions first. And I think as a matter of, not being a lawyer, but as a matter of principle, I think both of the dissenting opinions, were trying to say, look, that the court didn't really understand what it was doing here and really was making law where law didn't need to be made, number one. Number two, that really they didn't understand what they were breaking ground other than what the plaintiffs were arguing, right? And so the point here being, I think the seven of the two, it was a 7-2 decision. I think the 7 got it wrong. That's my view on this. I mean, in what other context, would you? And I think the questions were very enlightening. In what other context would you walk into like a Subway sandwich shop and have bread and deli meats and cheese and some lettuce and some toppings all laying out there and call that a sub sandwich? Now, you got all the components to make a sub sandwich, but it's not a sub sandwich. And it appears that 7 of the justices either don't understand how sandwiches are made or don't understand the process. That's my take on it. There's more to it than that, but that was my take of on reading the opinion today.
Yeah, let's get into that, because if we go back to Alito during oral arguments, and I believe we played it, he used the example, if I set some eggs and some ham and some onions and some green peppers up here, some diced food, is that an omelet? Remember that question he famously asked during the oral argument? And you just went there.
Absolutely.
With the sandwich ingredients. Now, what Gorsuch did here, ladies and gentlemen, what we're discussing, if you're new to this or don't know what we're talking about here, we're talking about the Vanderstock case, which is the framer-receiver rule. All right, or frames or receivers. Are frames and receivers or receivers actually guns? Are they firearms? And, of course, playing a prominent role in the case was the build or the buy, build, shoot from Polymer 80. Now, they go back to, because they have to, because this is when the statutory language was developed in the Gun Control Act of 1968, Ryan, as you're aware. And the term as a weapon, when Congress adopted the GCA, the Gun Control Act, in 1968, that term meant what it means today. Quote, an instrument of offensive or defensive combat, such as a club, sword, gun, or grenade. Now, plainly, according to Gorsuch and the majority, 7-2, plainly the finished buy, build, shoot kit is an instrument of combat. No one would confuse the semi-automatic pistol pictured above, because they have pictures here. Seems to be the new thing with judges now, actually showing pictures or doing videos. And I think we're going to see more of that down the road. But they kind of had to do that here, and I understand why they did it. Plainly, the finished buy, build, shoot kit is an instrument of combat. No one would confuse, that's offensive or defensive, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. No one would confuse the semi-automatic pistol pictured above with a tool or a toy. Of course, as sold, the kit requires some assembly, but a number of considerations persuade us that even as sold, the buy, build, shoot kit qualifies as a weapon. Consider first the feature of ordinary language. And this is where it gets fascinating, because Gorsuch, we find out from reading Thomas's dissent, relied on some amicus brief language, and Thomas was very accusatory, it seemed to me, of saying he's just buying and borrowing and stealing from an amicus brief. And I kind of read into that he was calling Gorsuch's his writing for the majority here very sophomoric for doing that. The term weapon is an artifact noun. Brian, have you ever heard the term artifact noun?
Can't recall that I have.
You mean that doesn't come up in conversation? I've written 3 books. I've never used that term. Oh, I better change that to an artifact noun.
Well, and Mark, this is the crux of the issue right here, isn't it? Right? The justices are having a hard time understanding what a firearm is and what it isn't. And rather than just ruling that the presumption of freedom and liberty, right, ruling with the people and against the government, what they've chosen to do is side with complicated language that people don't understand. Gorsuch, at one point, at least acknowledges, I think it was Gorsuch, that acknowledged that they weren't implying, or this ruling shouldn't be implied to, if somebody's making a firearm and they don't know they're making a firearm, then they shouldn't be, charged with a crime. Or he was taking some comfort in saying something along those lines.
We're going to go there. Because I'm going to rip him apart on that. Yeah.
But I looked at that, Mark, and I said, these guys they can't even follow the definition of a firearm. They don't know what it is. The way Congress and then the ATF have written the rules, if our Supreme Court justices are confused, how is the average American supposed to comply with the law? Let's just assume you and I want to always comply with the law, right? We want to comply. Mm-hmm. We're trying to do the right thing. We can't, because the language is so obtuse that it makes it almost impossible to follow the law. And by definition, when you can't understand the law, the people can't understand the law, that's an infringement on liberty, in my view. And the Supreme Court failed to recognize that today in the ruling. Yeah,
and it hinges on exactly as you were saying, Ryan, the intricacies and the nuances of language. And we are going to get into that because that plays a major role here. The term weapon is an artifact noun, a word for a thing created by humans. Artifact nouns are typically characterized by an intended function rather than by some ineffable natural essence. Now, that's from a brief. Reflecting as much, everyday speakers sometimes use artifact nouns to refer to unfinished objects, at least when their intended function is clear. And author, pay careful attention to this, ladies and gentlemen, as we take this to the break and then come back and dissect it, because the entire majority opinion is based on this. An author might invite your opinion on her latest novel, even if she sends you an unfinished manuscript. A friend might speak of the table he just bought at IKEA, even though hours of assembly remain ahead of him. In both cases, the artifact noun fits because the intended function of the unfinished object is obvious to speaker and listener alike. The term weapon can work this way too. Now, when we come back, I'm going to give you a little bit more from this, and Ryan, you and I will discuss this when we come back from the break, because this is where it gets lost in the sauce, quite frankly. And we're going to apply this to the frames, receivers, etc. And then we will eventually get into two of the concurring opinions. Kavanaugh, you mentioned Well, we're going to run out of time. When we come back, we'll talk about Kavanaugh and we'll talk about the other concurring opinion from Sotomayor. Jackson's really doesn't matter because I think she just wrote it to make herself seem relevant because she knows that she's not. And if you read her concurrence, you realize she realizes she's not. We'll be back right after this with Ryan Petty and pick apart the case. Don't go away. Fun stuff. The following segment of Armed American Radio's Daily Defense is being brought to you by Patriot Mobile. Visit patriotmobile.com/AAR and use the AAR promo code to get free activation today. Welcome back to the show. Yeah, welcome back to the show indeed. Mark Walters filling your prescription for freedom today here in the 6 Sauer studios, all brought to you by X Insurance. Of course, you just heard the Patriot Mobile rejoin. I'm in my hands. You can't see it on camera because we're doing some work on camera. We're swapping them out, but it's audio only on all those social media platforms, but I'm holding up a phone. It is a Patriot Mobile activated phone. You can do the same thing. Visit patriotmobile.com today, patriotmobile.com/AAR to be more specific, and get a free month. I was going to say activation, but it's a free month now. Keep remembering to make that change. It is a free month now at patriotmobile.com/AAR. You can find them and all of our great partners at armedamericanradio.com. Ryan Petty, welcome back. So let's go back to this language because this is fun to talk about. So if someone, continuing now, a friend might speak of a table he just bought at IKEA, Gorsuch says in the majority, even though hours of assembly remain ahead of him. In both cases, the artifact noun, new term for us, fits because the intended function of the unfinished object is obvious to speaker and listener alike. Now, maybe they do refer to that box with all of those parts as a table, but referring to it doesn't make it so, does it, Ryan?
It doesn't. And, here's the problem. I'm reading through this, and you can see the arguments that Gorsuch and the
Yes.
others are making, and I understand their point. Right?
Yes.
I understand their point that what they're trying to prevent is somebody putting all of the pieces of a firearm together, not calling it a firearm, and in so doing exempting it from all the federal firearms laws and regulations, and then selling that in an unregulated fashion. That's what I think their biggest fear is. I at least reading through this, that's what my takeaway is. And it's sort of I go to IKEA and I buy a bookshelf, and of course the bookshelf comes in a box. It's a bunch of parts. It's not actually a bookshelf until you put it together. And I think they're looking at it as the IKEA model, where you are in fact there to buy a bookshelf. You went into the store, you found the bookshelf, and of course you purchased the parts, and you got to go home and put it together. That's what they're looking at these kits like. Now, bookshelves aren't regulated. Firearms happen to be regulated in the United States. So I think that's where, if I'm trying to read their minds, Mark, I think that's where what they're trying to prevent.
Yes.
Now, whether that's right or not, whether you and I agree with that or not, are different issues, but that's where their heads are, at least from what I can tell.
And you can get, again, there's a lot of nuance here because you can get into it breaks down on what is the definition by statute of a firearm. Well, the definition of a firearm isn't plucked from thin air, given to us by God. It's a man-made definition written into a statute by lawmakers, many of whom don't have a clue what they're talking about. They include starter pistols or anything else. And I'm going to get into that definition. I'm intentionally not going to that definition yet by statute for you. There's a method to my madness. I want to talk about this first, then we'll go to that, as I think it will become clearer for you after hearing this conversation, what it is we're referring to. Then we'll go to that statute, and it might be a little bit easier for those of you, particularly if your heads aren't in this game and this might be your first show. We want you to understand this. But I do, like you, I could look at this and think, well, okay, based on the case before them, based on the literal language in the statute, which we will go to soon, you can completely see why they ruled the way they ruled. And he went out of his way to maintain that they were staying within the guardrails of this specific case only, didn't he, Ryan? He made mention of that multiple times, writing for the majority.
He did, and this is where I go back and wonder if this was the right. I don't want to. I can't second guess whether this was the right case or the right defendants or the right. I don't know, Mark.
It's the one we got, so it is. It has to be. Because it's the one we got.
Right? It's the one we got. So what I read from that was that the Supreme Court is open to allowing these parts to be manufactured, even parts that could be readily transformed into what is quote unquote a frame or receiver.
They use the word converted,
but they're hesitant. I think the idea of the kit, right? I go back to that thing you bought at IKEA, right? It all came in a box, it's all packaged, and there's instructions on how to put it together to turn it into whatever it is, the thing that you bought at IKEA, right? That seems to be what they're afraid of. But if we got the right case in front of them, a different case, maybe I would say, another case where it was just a part, right? And you bought the part, and then it was on you as an American citizen to have the knowledge or acquire the knowledge or whatever to put it together, that they might rule differently. I don't know that for a fact, but it seemed to be that they were leaving some wiggle room there.
Yeah, and again, I think it's important that if you look at it literally, you can understand why the decision came down the way it came down, literally. But there's too much involved, because even though, and again, the Supreme Court is reviewing the statute and comparing it again, to the case that they were presented. So I see why they did what they did. However, you've got to do like Thomas did, and you've got to go ahead and you've got to break this down. Is a receiver a gun? Now let's go to the Polymer 80 kit. You've probably seen Polymer 80 kits, ladies and gentlemen. Many of you have them. Many of you have built them. If you haven't, you'll likely see them out there. It's going to be serialized and all that stuff. All that nonsense can cost them a fortune. But I will say this, that if someone hands me a kit, Ryan, or I have one, and somebody says, ooh, what's that? I'm not going to say it's a gun. Or if somebody says to me, it's a gun, oh, that's a gun, I'm going to say, no, it's a gun kit. It will be a gun when I'm finished with it, but I got some work to do on it first. Right now, it's just a bunch of parts. So then we can get into the nuance, right? And Gorsuch goes here too, but he doesn't go here. He mentions it, but it wasn't part of the case. So essentially, for the purposes of his ruling, he didn't go there, even though he went there. He just didn't go into detail, and they didn't use it in the majority opinion in their ruling. But that question becomes, well, let's say that kit is 7 parts. When is it not a gun? Can you break it into 12 parts? Does that make it not a gun? And he uses an example of a heap of sand. If you start taking grains of sand out one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, eventually you don't have a heap of sand anymore. If you put them in different places, do you see where the nuance comes into play here? What if that kit were 12 parts? What if it were 18 parts? Can Polymer 80 break it down even further and make you do more work on it? And then it's not fitting the statute? Who makes that decision? I guess the Supreme Court makes that. This is where it gets really fascinating. Taking another break, Ryan, when we come back, I'll read the actual statutory language of what the Gun Control Act defines as a firearm, and then we'll continue to break it down. And I want to get into those 2 concurring opinions before we go to Thomas's evisceration of the majority. We'll be back right after this, folks. Don't go away. Mic is live.
Daniel Defense firearms are guaranteed for life, trusted worldwide, and designed, engineered, and manufactured right here in America. Daniel Defense, freedom, passion, precision.
Yeah, Daniel Defense is freedom, passion, and precision. Visit them, Daniel Defense, DanielDefense.com. Get on that email list. You have 2 more days to try to win that icebreaker over there. Unbelievable stuff. Make sure to get on that list. That's something you want to win. Trust me, I'm not getting on that list because I want you to win it. For some reason, I guess maybe I was just feeling lucky. If I get on that list, maybe I'll win it. I don't want to do that to you, so I'm not getting on. That's just one more chance for you to win. Make sure to visit DanielDefense.com. And all of our great partners, Ammo Squared is another one. They feed those Daniel Defense rifles and all the guns, the Kahr arms, the North American arms. They've got you covered over at ammosquared.com. Today is garbage day at the ranch. I got my notification today. You've got ammo. Comes in. That's what it says in the subject line. You've got ammo. I love that. I love seeing I've got ammo, and I get more and more and more of it every single Wednesday in 3 different calibers. You can do the same thing. Visit ammosquared.com. Ryan Petty, welcome back to the SIG SAUER studios with me. Let's continue with and I'm going to quote all of this from Gorsuch's writing for the majority here. The Gun Control Act of 1968, GCA, requires those engaged in importing, manufacturing, or dealing in firearms to obtain federal licenses, keep sales records, conduct background checks, and mark their products with serial numbers. Greg in Dallas, that sounds like a lot of infringements, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ryan, sounds like infringements to me right out of the box. Oddly, we never heard the words or read the words Second Amendment in this at all, or liberty or freedom. There was that. Was noticeable to me. The act defines firearm to include A, any weapon which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, and B, the frame or receiver, which is what we're talking about here, of any such weapon. He continues, recent years have witnessed profound changes in how guns are made and sold, with companies now able to sell weapons parts kits that individuals can assemble into functional firearms at home. These kits vary widely in how complete they come, kind of goes to what we were talking about before the break, right? How complete they come, how many different parts before it becomes fitting of that definition, right? Yeah, so there's that. And how much work is required to finish them. Sales have grown exponentially, with law enforcement agencies reporting a dramatic increase in untraceable, here's the words, ghost guns used in crimes from 1,600 in 2017 to more than 19,000 in 2021. 19,000, 100 million gun owners, 450 plus million guns in America. 325 million Americans, 19,000. So my liberties, Ryan, and freedoms are based on the actions of criminals. And is that what I'm being told here? Wait till we get to some of these concurring opinions. They're wild. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, all gun control is enacted out of fear that law-abiding citizens are going to do something, illegal and hurt other citizens, and that's a faulty premise to start with. But it seems like it's one that's accepted, certainly in the halls of our judicial system, and certainly at least with 7 of the justices in the Supreme Court. You're right. Not one of them stepped back and said, "Okay, I'm not regulating." I'll go back to my previous example. I'm not regulating bookshelves from IKEA. This is a firearm, and firearms under our Constitution have special protection. In other words, they need an additional level of scrutiny. Any judgments we make or any opinions that we write need to be scrutinized using the lens of the Second Amendment. And I think the key phrase there, I'll reintroduce a key phrase to our Supreme Court justices that they may not have heard in a while, but shall not be infringed. Let me go back to what the problem is here. We are, unfortunately, at the Supreme Court arguing over regulations in an executive branch agency that can rather easily now be overturned or changed. And of course, with the next Democratic president, should there ever be one again, although I think Democrats are facing an extinction level event.
Agreed.
In my mind, because they keep picking the 20 side of the every 80-20 issue. But let's say we had a Democrat president, could easily be reinstated under the rulemaking authority. And to the point of one of the justices in here, and it may have even been, I could have been Thomas, it could have been one of the other ones. The Congress has delegated some rulemaking authority to the executive branch here. And so we're fighting a battle over some rules in the executive branch, which Trump could just change, right, at this point, and we wouldn't have to deal with all this garbage. The real problem, Mark, as I see it, as I step back and look at all of this and read these opinions and everything, is why are we having this fight? The problem is Congress. The Gun Control Act and the National Firearms Act are likely unconstitutional.
Yes.
Right?
That's why we're here.
The constitutional battle I would like to be fighting right now, Mark, is that one. I'd like to be fighting the Gun Control Act is unconstitutional and the National Firearms Act is unconstitutional. And I'd like to have that battle. And I'd like to go back to the Supreme Court and remind them of the clause shall not be infringed. And I think that's a case that I'd like to see put in front of them. But until we can do that, we've got to elect people of both parties. This goes for both parties. This is Republicans too. We've got to vote for Republicans that understand that the Second Amendment is not a second-class civil right, and they need to pass laws acknowledging it as such.
Yeah, and I'm going to be fair to Gorsuch here. I got the impression that he was thinking along those lines, but this case didn't give them that opportunity. And he made mention to that a number of times, not in the exact context you were referring to. But again, it goes back to that analogy. He did not go outside the guardrails. The majority did not step out of the guardrails here, because this is what we're getting to. All of this comes down to a definition, a statutory definition. Now, the Biden administration in a weaponized ATF changed its definition to suit their political agenda so that they could add new things to regulate or ban. That's why they did it, ladies and gentlemen. That's simple reason. And you just hinted at that, Ryan. Another Democrat or whatever, and we're going to go there with Kavanaugh. The naivety from Kavanaugh here was just astonishing to me. Bottom line here is, ladies and gentlemen, because I want to get to a couple of these concurrences, is the fact that they overturned the Fifth Circuit. That's what happened. I would highly recommend you read it. AWR wrote about it. It's out there. Go read it. Read the decision in its entirety, and you will rub your eyes a few times and shake your head and think, well, wait a minute. Can't that be changed? Yes, it can. It's pretty simple. It's like spinning wheels here. We're wasting our time with this, but it happened. So that's where we're at. And what we'll do now is I want to go to, Ryan, I'm assuming you read Kavanaugh. You read the concurring opinions?
I've read most of Kavanaugh's, not all of it, but go ahead.
All right. So let me start with Sotomayor before we go to the break. I joined the court's opinion in full, and I stopped right there, and I thought, I don't care what you have to say, quite frankly, because I know how you're going to rule in any Second Amendment case already. Your opinion means jack squat to me. But this is a place for her to stick her nose out there. I write separately to address 2 points raised in the writings that follow. The first is a concern that ATF's rule might leave regulated entities in doubt about when and how to comply with the Gun Control Act. Kavanaugh concurring. That worry is unfounded. Really? Unfounded? Okay, she hasn't been paying attention. For more than half a century, firearms dealers, manufacturers, and importers have complied with the Gun Control Act's requirements. They have marked their products with serial numbers, kept records of firearm sales, and conducted background checks for prospective buyers. These requirements are not new to the industry, and covered entities know they must maintain familiarity with the statute and accompanying regulations to run their businesses. In fact, the Act requires such entities to obtain federal licenses before selling, manufacturing, or importing any firearms in the first place. She's poo-pooing it off as, look, it's been there for 50 years. They all know it. Well, guess what? The only reason they're doing it is because the ATF threatens to... luckily, the break comes out. Angry Mark was about ready to come out of the box, is because you've said it's a crime not to. They risk their livelihoods and their freedom, or if the ATF shows up at their door, their own lives.
10.
We'll be right back.
This segment of Armed American Radio's Daily Defense is being brought to you by Daniel Defense. Visit DanielDefense.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the 6 Hour Studios, final segment of Wednesday's Garbage Day, Armed American Radio's Daily Defense. Mark Walters filling your prescription for freedom here in the chair at the ranch. And we're sitting in front of a very powerful Patriot Mobile microphone here. It's all brought to you by X Insurance and all of our partners. Please visit them all, heavensharvest.com, barrelbuddy.com, Crossbreed Holsters. They're all there for you. Pick something up from MyPillow. Pick something up from Patriots Relief. Pick up some Defender Coffee and support those that support this program and your right to keep and bear arms. Let's continue the conversation. Moving right along. Quick day today, Ryan. I appreciate you being here. We're talking with Parkland Dad Ryan Petty. Let me go back to Sotomayor again. Someone who I can tell you right now loves voting against your gun rights. So her opinion really doesn't matter, and I'm not going to say naivety. She knows exactly what she's doing here. Continuing with her real quick, Ryan, it's plain text, covers firearm kits, meaning the statutory language, and unfinished frames or receivers designed for ready conversion, as the court explains. So for entities who seek to comply with the act in good faith, ATF's rule should come as no surprise, nor should it create any difficulty discerning how to abide by the law. To the extent any manufacturer has doubts about whether a particular product qualifies as a covered firearm, moreover, it can eliminate uncertainty by seeking clarification from the agency. ATF encourages manufacturers to submit potentially covered products to the agency for classification decisions. Really? Let's go to the Akins Accelerator. Yep, it's good. Yep, it's good. Yep, it's good. Yep, here's your 5th letter. Here's your 10th letter. Here's your 100th letter. Yep, you're good. Go ahead and invest your life savings and make it. Go ahead and sell 500,000 of them. Then we're going to change the damn rules and come back and put you in jail if you don't abide by our latest rule change, Ryan. Angry Mark is out of the box. Please calm me down. Try. I dare you.
Well, I'm not even going to try, because Sotomayor, that is so absolutely disingenuous. And look, any company, anybody doing business in the firearms industry or outside the firearms industry, what markets need to be successful is certainty, right? You can sort of figure out how to live with rules that the government makes, but when they change every time there's a new administration, or they change on the political whims of whomever's in office, that's the kind of uncertainty that we can't deal with. And number one, right? And she doesn't understand that because she's never run a business. She's never done anything in her life other than probably get appointed to courts and sit there and listen to arguments after she got through law school. Number one. Number two, the ATF isn't particularly helpful, Justice, in answering these questions, and they've been inconsistent on top of that. So it's not like you're calling, your local hardware store and asking a couple of questions and getting a quick answer, or calling a mechanic, down the road and saying, "Hey, my car's making this noise. These are the problems I've got." The ATF oftentimes doesn't pick up the phone, doesn't respond in a timely manner if they do, and they've taken the position a number of times, as you know, Mark, of sort of saying, well, we're not going to comment on that, or we're not going to tell you whether or not it's legal. You'll have to build it first. That kind of uncertainty is what kills an industry. And it's that kind of uncertainty that people like Sotomayor and Democrats would like to see at the ATF. Heck, I don't even think Biden and his administration cared half the time if they got the rules implemented. It was the threat of the rule. It was the threat of the changes. It was the ambiguity that keeps the firearms industry in their minds in check, because you don't know from day to day whether you're committing a crime and whether you're going to end up in an orange jumpsuit. And that's the position Democrats and people like Sotomayor want the gun industry in. They want us constantly fearful that we're going to lose our freedoms because we've broken a law or a rule, and they're not going to help us understand how to navigate the nuances of federal regulations.
Well, you better believe it. Now, well said. I've calmed down a little bit. Let's go to Kavanaugh in his concurring opinion. Under ATF's rule, an individual or business acting in good faith might nonetheless have substantial difficulty determining when weapons, parts, kits, or unfinished frames or receivers qualify as firearms, and thereby become subject to the Gun Control Act's licensing, record-keeping, serialization, and background check requirements. Some weapons, parts, kits, and unfinished frames or receivers may qualify as firearms and others may not. The line is not entirely clear. Despite the vagueness of the line, the penalties for violations are significant and can include fines and imprisonment. But importantly, under the Gun Control Act, someone can be penalized for violating the licensing, record-keeping, or serialization requirements only if he does so willfully. To prove willfulness, the government must demonstrate that an individual knew that his conduct was unlawful, not merely that he knew the facts that made his conduct unlawful. Therefore, with respect to ATF's rule, the willfulness requirement should help prevent the government from unfairly penalizing an individual who is not aware that his conduct violates the law. Are you flipping kidding me? Am I hearing him say ignorance of the law? We've also, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Now it is? No, wait, it gets better. It gets better. As to background check violations, by contrast, the statute penalized violations committed knowingly. Now, he goes into knowingly and willfully. Unlike the willfully, it generally does not require knowledge that the conduct was unlawful. That said, at oral argument, the government represented that it would likely decline to charge someone for a background check violation in that kind of situation where the individual was not aware that he was violating the law. As the government seemed to recognize, if the government were to charge a background check violation against an individual who was unaware that he was violating the law, that defendant might have a due process argument based on lack of fair notice. I expect that the government will seek to avoid that potential fair notice problem by adhering to its oral argument representation that it would likely decline to bring charges in those circumstances. My God, I came out of my seat when I read that. Is the man stupid? Is he not been paying attention to what the ATF has been doing to innocent people outside of killing them? Because when they're dead, they don't really care about whether or not they're going to have to pay their legal fees, have their life upended, be charged with felonies, be staring at imprisonment, and maybe, well, I have a due process case. Does anyone want to go through that process? And is Kavanaugh stupid enough to believe that the government is going to keep its word? Ryan, you can take me to the break and end it.
That was the most naively written opinion I have ever read in my life. Has he not been paying attention the last 4 years where the Biden administration went after every FFL for
Apparently not.
willful and accidental violations of federal regulations? If you didn't cross your T's and dot your I's correctly, if you spelled the county of birth of the person buying a firearm wrong, you could lose your license. Where has Kavanaugh been? And does he remember what they did to him just a few short years ago at his confirmation hearing? These people want to attack your freedom. They don't like us. They want to control us. And I am so disappointed that Justice Kavanaugh has such a short memory. That, or he must have a hell of a therapist.
Unbelievable. And the perfect timing, Ryan. I'm not even going to get in to our favorite box checker DEI nominee, Justice Jackson's concurring opinion. Let's just read the last line. I concur because I read the court's opinion to be consistent with this view. Okay. What law school did you buy your degree from? Good heavens, heavens. Armed American Radio. Just trust the government, ladies and gentlemen. It's all good. Kavanaugh says so. You know, it's all cool. You'll have an argument. Your life will be destroyed, but you'll have an argument nonetheless. Armed American Radio will get some sleep on this tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and likely pick it up tomorrow because we're going to be here talking about it because they don't want us talking about it, which is exactly what we're going to do. Enjoy your day. Stay safe. We'll see you on the radio tomorrow. All right, guys, thanks for jumping in today. We'll have video back up for you tomorrow. Just making a camera swap today. Not enough time to get it in and some connection things, you know. So, hey, it is, after all, a national radio show, right? So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Angry Mark out of the box. Hope I didn't offend any poor liberals out there. Good Lord. This was tough to read, especially those concurring opinions. Of course, Thomas just skillfully, surgically just eviscerated all of them. And we'll cover some of that tomorrow for you. Enjoy your day, guys. Stay safe out there. And remember, never leave your cave without your club. And yeah, they're all infringements. You ought to be able to buy any gun in any form you want because you are a free man or woman.